Welcome along to the Football Show on this Tuesday afternoon. Bank Holiday Monday is behind us. Gary Breen is on the way. Lots to talk to Gary about. Ronan Mullen will be alongside me in studio. Before all of that, though, January transfer window has closed and not one, not two, but three Republic of Ireland internationals are on the move. To tell us more, Dan McDonnell is with us. Daniel, hello.
Hi, Joe. How are things?
Evan Ferguson, Gavin Bazunu and John Egan. Let's start with Ferguson because it's been quasi-saga for us as we've looked on. And in the end, I suppose the move which made the most sense, Graham Potter in particular, is the move which has happened. So the man who gave him debut as a 16-year-old brings him to West Ham. And with the likes of Antonio in that terrible car crash and Nicholas Fulkrug, who's out for several weeks now, there's also a vacancy there. So a lot of things about this line up and make good sense.
Yeah, and I think it makes perfect sense. The only thing that alarmed me across the last week was when there was a bit of chat about a sort of a sale. And I sort of thought, like, there's been quite a methodical approach to Evan Ferguson's career to a point, and a sort of a splash and dash sort of January sale last minute in the window, to me, would have made me slightly worried, just in the sense of why are you doing this? Because there has been sort of suggestions that certainly people at Brighton still feel he's a very high worth player, that he will be a big sale. But obviously with the injuries he's had, that I think if something had been done now, like a loan with a option that you have to buy a mandatory option, I'd have been a little bit concerned. So I'm really happy with this scenario. I think from a sort of a selfish Irish perspective, I think it's pretty much clear that the next 5 months at Brighton, I'm not sure how much he was going to play. And I think you're going to a club who needs someone in his position for the reasons you've mentioned, with the players you've mentioned, with the manager factor that he's worked for before. And maybe it doesn't go well, right? Maybe it doesn't go well, but I feel like it's still a better option than staying at Brighton. And I also feel for him, it's a better option than a rush job deal now. I think it sort of gives him sort of 5 months to, okay, let's see what you can do, and to take stock and then see where he goes in the summer. I think for Brighton, it's the best chance of getting a good price. There's no doubt they're readying him for sale. I don't think there's any world really in which I see him playing a big part for Brighton again, unless there's dramatic change there. And I think for the clubs maybe at home who are looking for a sell-on value, I think everyone will be happy to see him go and do well now. And I think his future is in his hands rather than maybe a rushed decision you might regret.
Yeah. He will wear the number 34 jersey for those of you interested. And if you saw West Ham lose to Chelsea last night, it was a case of Jared Bowen leading the line, which is not necessarily his strong suit. Carlos Soler and Mohamed Kudus in support. So he really should get game time. When you talk about how Brighton see him as still a very big sale and there's a payday imminent, and I guess, that is a little bit how Brighton operate. At the peak of Ferguson mania, there was talk of, even on Match of the Day, this kid, big money. The Chelseas of the world will be sniffing around him. The Arsenals of the world sniffing around him. If he was on sale tomorrow, come and get him, highest bidder, let's go. We want this done by close of business. Where do you think he'd pitch up now?
Yeah, this is going back to the Queeveen Kelleher sale sort of price thing, isn't it? It's like, what is he worth here? I mean, listen, I'm going off reports in England at the weekend, from people who cover West Ham very closely. So they're obviously probably on top of the discussions. And they were saying around 40, but my sort of impression of it from sort of any inquiries I've met is that Brighton definitely see him as a player worth more than that, but probably know that they couldn't charge a huge amount more on the basis of what he's done, I guess, in the last while. But this is my point, really. I mean, like, Premier League money is so crazy now that, like, he's 4 or 5 goals away from being back to 60 again.
Yeah,
very, very, very easily.
And it's funny. So I think I was also asking not just the fee. I was like, where would it still be? Arsenal, Chelsea, that echelon? Do we think?
Yeah, I mean, they were interested in this window, it seems, and I certainly know Chelsea were made an inquiry at the end of the last window. Okay. And look, he's still 20. He's still like a player in a position where the trends are coming around maybe towards that type of a number 9 again. There's a shortage of him in his age bracket, I guess. And the concern is the injuries now. I think, I think if it wasn't for the injury concerns, he's a very obvious investment for a lot of those clubs.
Yeah.
I think so. I still believe, and look, you have to be conscious with this, of course, that there's so much Irish desire for Evan Ferguson to be a success that you almost feel like you want to counter that and temper your own feelings around it. But equally, you look back and go, well, I think he was the first player since Wayne Rooney as a teenager to score like double figure goals in a calendar year. Like it's very, like, he's done a hell of a lot. He's had a tough time, but it won't take a huge amount to get going again. And that's why I'm glad they haven't rushed into anything. But I still think he can go for that 50, 60. I know 100 was being talked about at the time, and maybe that seems miles away now, and maybe not. But I definitely think if he does well at West Ham with his age, like the contract, etc., he easily goes into that bracket.
And just remind us about the state of his body. Still only 20. Has this been same injury throughout, different niggly injuries, serious injuries been in there as well? What do we know about how fit he is and how he's feeling?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that it's been a couple of different ones that's just slightly concerning. The people probably will remember the Fabinho tackle, and that was a shocker. And at that time there was knee concerns. There was talk about patellar issues, which I think I remember Stephen Kenny speaking about at one time. But the issue last summer that sort of meant that he missed pre-season this year and was slow, that was an ankle problem. So there's been a couple of different things. It's just that slight concern, it's like he's obviously he is a very impressive athlete, and he's still probably, he was very highly developed at 14, so you can't quite say he's still growing, but still, I suppose he's growing into the demands of like top level, sort of professional for sport, and in that very demanding role. Like, I know even just from being away last week talking to the Alkmaar manager about Troy Parrott, he was very positive, but he was saying it's still, the slight concern is the physicality of the demands of playing that position, i.e. the number 9, the durability to play that position, I suppose, at the highest level and play that schedule. So it's a little niggle. Like, you can't lie about that. You just need to come back now and see him play 8 to 10 games and go, okay, we need to relax about this and not be concerned.
You broke the news last night on Bazunu that this was imminent, and it's since been confirmed. So Standard Liège, who are 7th in the Belgian league, have taken him on loan until the end of the season. Bazunu is coming back from an Achilles, which, the seriousness of that needs no introduction. And he has been out since April. So he had played a couple of times for the Southampton 21s, kept a couple of clean sheets. You were saying your piece, Udinese were interested. There was a Danish club interested. But there's a link with Fergal Harkin, who League of Ireland fans will know, of course. He is their sporting director. He had been at Man City and was in charge of the loan department.
Yeah.
And so guess lines of communication easily opened there, and Kelleher has gone. Why has he gone? Is there just Southampton, that's now an impasse?
Yeah, no, there's a few reasons. Look, Gavin Bazunu, when he ruptured his Achilles tendon last year, he was meant to be out actually until after this window. There was some talk of maybe February, March. He's not registered in the Premier League squad. It's quite simple. So while he did travel to the game at the weekend, unless they were going to take someone out or do something, he wasn't going to be involved for the rest of the season. So it was, I guess, a pretty straightforward one that he had to go out on loan once he got back fit. He's been playing for our 21s. But I think Gavin Bazunu's personality is across his entire career is to go and play. So I don't think that interested him. It was always going to be Europe. So I suppose people naturally would, even across yesterday, you'd see people going, at West Brom, they need a keeper. He's still come back from a very serious long-term injury, and all the clubs that were in the mix were probably clubs that play one game a week. That the championship schedule is, you don't do the huge amount of training in the championship. It's often 3-game weeks. It's a bit of a rush job. Ajax did make a late inquiry, but they have a sort of a senior number 1 keeper at the moment. I think he had to go and play somewhere. Here in Wien and Holland were also in the mix. I think Udinese was last week. I think that wasn't a player in the last 24 hours. Liège was one. And as you mentioned, Fergal Harkin's story for another day. Very interesting backstory, how he's ascended from going up in Donegal to being a sporting director of a club in Belgium. But he would have had a strong relationship with Bazunu when he was at Man City. And obviously, look, no offence to whoever the standard age goalkeeper is at the moment. I'm not versed on who that person is, but I'm pretty sure Gavin Bazunu is coming to play between now and the end of the season. And I think for him, it's just a holding pattern move. It sort of makes sense. Looks like Southampton might get relegated. In that case, there's Aaron Ramsdale get sold. Is Gavin Bazunu first choice keeper in the Championship in August? It's very possible.
Okay. And quick word on John Egan.
Yeah, John Egan went to Burnley. Burnley have this incredible defensive record, just don't concede any goals, and he hasn't got into the team. Look, he's 33 this month, sorry, apologies, or last month. I think he's just turning 33. Oh, no, maybe it's later this year, but either way, he's in that bracket, and you just can't waste time. He had injury at Sheffield United. I think, players sometimes now, like transfers, people bounce around a little bit more. You see these shorter term deals maybe at a certain level. Clubs can be certain, maybe it's just getting ins and outs and being a bit more pragmatic with balancing the books. But John Egan could have hung around at Burnley. He wasn't going to play. His career is in that, I suppose, that sort of last lap or last sort of section. So yeah, he'll go to Hull City. Sean McLaughlin, another Cork lad, is at Hull City playing. So you could have an all Irish defensive pair in there. And if he wants to get back in the Ireland squad, which I presume he does, he needs to be playing.
Very good, Dan. Thank you.
No worries.
Gary Breen, been a while. How are you?
I'm very well, Joe. How are you?
Good. So we were talking earlier on to Dan about this Evan Ferguson move. Bazunu and Egan as well, but Evan Ferguson obviously a bit of a saga at this stage. Do we like the feel of West Ham for him?
Yeah, I do actually. I think the club would be good for him, but I think ultimately it's the fact that it's Potter as his manager who knows him so well. I think that will help him settling in, is that he'll know what the kind of requirements are under that manager. I know it's a big challenge in terms of trying to turn West Ham around, but I think he can play a really good role there. And I think it kind of makes sense for all parties, the fact that he'll have the opportunity now to play regularly in a way that he hasn't done at Brighton. And I think sometimes people kind of really build it up about the fact he's not playing at such a young age, but I haven't minded it so much in that it's afforded him the opportunity to get fit, to get healthy, and without the kind of demands of playing every week. I know he'll need to address that and get that type of match fitness, but I think that will come quickly. I just feel at 20, I just felt it was too often he was injured. I wanted his body to heal. I think that gives him the opportunity when he's on the bench to do that. And I think now he'll be in a good position for the remainder of this season. And hopefully that bodes well for us.
And I presume debut at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you're still, and you would have seen it with any number of players, you're still not just filling out, but almost getting your body hardened to demands. Yep. And reasonable stints in the gym at 18, 19, 20 might be a lot better for him than playing on that treadmill.
Yeah, no, I genuinely feel that would be my kind of perspective on it, Joe. And because the worry for me would ultimately be about, like these really gifted players, but don't have the durability in their body for whatever reason. We've seen some top class players, the likes of Jonathan Woodgate, that type of guy who just, he always seems to be injured. And there's so many of them. So you kind of start to worry about that, despite the fact that you looked at Everton and thought, what a great physical specimen at such a young age, strong, so good technically as well, but also good at using his body. But I just feel that on what was a real explosion onto the scene, I just think that I would look at the positives. I know, listen, it will be frustrating, of course it will, for any young player, the fact that he's not playing. But I would just look at the positives. And I think I would hope that the people around him will be saying that this has been a great time for you to really get fit, really get healthy in terms of let your body develop and just go again. And I think he's in a great opportunity to do that now at West Ham.
Yeah. Bazunu's obviously coming back.
Yeah.
A big injury. So, he hasn't played much football and he's gone to Belgium for end of the season and we'll see what happens then. We've all been so fixated on Caoimhín Kelleher. He's kind of the forgotten man.
Yeah, I think he is in terms of how high profile Caoimhín's been for Liverpool. But we're still aware of what fantastic talent Bazunu is. And I think this is a great opportunity again as well. I think just a little bit away, just can go about getting himself fit. I know there'll still be a lot of spotlight on him playing over there, but just out of the spotlight of the Premier League a little bit and how demanding it would be, especially in terms of the situation that Southampton are in. But that's an awful injury, what he's had. So it will take a bit of time. And I think he's been good throughout his career. He's not been scared of challenges. He obviously went down to the lower leagues and played at Rochdale. and those type of clubs. So this will be something that will be brilliant for his development as a young professional going forward, experience in another league, and we should also benefit massively from that.
To the Premier League at the weekend, Arsenal won.
Yes.
Man City 5.
Yep.
Not taken away from the Arsenal performance. Genuinely not taken away from it. We'll talk about how they were good. Like the City thing is just so endlessly confusing. So they can't run anymore.
Yeah.
So many of the team, and you've Bernardo Silva and Kovacic kind of thrown to the wolves a little bit midfield. Once things go against them, their body language, it's just it falls apart. And then, as good as Arsenal were, goal one, Akanji, his touch is shocking, really, albeit great pressing from Arsenal. Goal two, one of the worst passes of Phil Foden's career, and the deflection, and that almost knocks the wind out of their sails. We'll talk about Lewis Skelly, he was brilliant, but Ortega should save that realistically. Brilliant Havertz goal on the break, can't take away from that one. And then Nwaneri's great strike as well. But, is he under pressure? Is he it's a very nice situation for him and he takes full advantage. You just kind of think, just so poor. It's not going to turn anytime soon, this City thing. This is a more prolonged dip than any of us had foreseen.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. And you looked at the situation in terms of how much money they've had to spend in this January window, and it's something that you feel it's quite panicky, isn't it? But they have to address the situation, and it's so glaringly obvious. And it's not taking anything away from the Arsenal win, because City have beat them so often at the Emirates. But you have to put it in context, Joe. And that's not, listen, let's not get all the Arsenal supporter conspiracy theories all jumping down our throats now, because you have to still beat what's put in front of you. But I couldn't have picked a more perfect game for Arsenal to have to stay on the coattails of Liverpool. At this weekend, I absolutely identified that Bournemouth was the challenge. That was the biggest, toughest challenge of the two for Liverpool away at Bournemouth as opposed to Arsenal at home to City, because it was the perfect opposition for Arsenal in terms of just showing their athleticism, the fact that City will come out, there will be space. The problem that Arsenal have and continue to have is that they can't open up teams who sit in and play that low block. And even that win against Wolves, which was huge in the context, Joe, in terms of really developing that kind of team spirit, that, backs to the walls win, down to 10 men, everything's going against you, and yet you still win. But it was perfect for them. And what it did, it kind of papered over the fact that before the sending off, Arsenal just could not finish the chances that they had. And that has been a common theme. And that is where that so much talk and debate rages about the fact that they need to get a killer number 9. And then you hear about that £60 million bid for Ollie Watkins, and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm not sure if he solves the problem. I know he's a fine centre forward, but when Arsenal are playing against teams that have a low block, there's no space to run in behind. And that's what Watkins essentially is the best part of his game. So I've actually looked back on it now in terms of the context of the weekend. And I think I'm glad Arsenal haven't done any business. I generally think just keep your money, build the pot up so that you can actually go out and afford that special player that they're going to need to make this team better and potentially challenge Liverpool. I know the player I would love, whether or not they'll ever be able to get him. I can't see anyone who looks more like an Arsenal player than him, and how good he is. And of course, Arsenal will experience that again in that second leg of that semi-final. But on the back of winning against City, Joe, and in that Wolves win, even at 2-0 deficit, I think Arsenal are more than capable of going up to St James's Park and winning that game. I genuinely do. I think they'll tap into the fact that Newcastle will feel that they're virtually in the final, but the nerves will kick in because if they're so desperate to finally win something, I genuinely believe Arsenal can take advantage of that.
City have spent money, by the way, so...
Yeah, £180 million, isn't it, in this window?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Marmouche, he looks lively. He's been the most expensive buy. Nico Gonzalez, Porto, 50 million sterling.
Yeah.
Kuzanov, we saw make his debut. He's going to take some time to settle in for just over 30 million. Victor Reyes, Palmeiras, 30 million. So in Euro, that's 210 million just dropped.
Yeah. And you said it there, it's going to take time. I generally think it will do, because it's not easy. We've seen when City are at their established best, and then new players come in, and they found it so difficult to understand what the remit is of playing in that team. So now these players are going into a team that is playing so bad. I mean, you look at them and you just think, it's as soon as the tempo rises, they just can't stay with any team. It's incredible in terms of just how vulnerable they look. So it's a test of his coaching ability, which no one should really question, but it will be a test of those players coming into that situations where it's not an established winning machine. And they're all experienced. And what is noticeable, Joe, is that you see all these top defenders, and they're brilliant when the likes of De Bruyne are keeping the ball for like long periods, Silva, all them guys in that front six. But now that ball quickly comes back, and those defenders have got to defend, and they've got to defend quickly before they can take their time, take an age to get set. They're proving they're not very good at it.
Havertz, as ever, was his own mini drama within the drama.
Yeah. It's such a difficult one for him, Joe, because he's never claimed to be an out-and-out centre-forward.
Yeah.
He's doing an unbelievable job for Arsenal in terms of what he's doing. I think it's been a really good signing. But the load on him is so ridiculous, because ultimately he's paying for the sins of the likes of Martinelli, that he don't score enough goals in those wide areas. And when Saka's not there, there's not that threat. And you kind of think about the rest of the team, it kind of all be on his shoulders, surely.
In defence of him as well. So in the TV coverage, they were adamant, if he was confident, he would have taken that shot on himself. I thought it was perfectly fine to square it to Odegaard, given the angle he was at where the keeper was at. I know there was a defender close-ish to Odegaard, and maybe a greedier, more out-and-out striker would have taken the shot. But I didn't think that was a bad thing. The goal he scored was magnificent. I mean, the run, the movement, overlap on the outside, cuts inside, whips it in, quality. I know, of course, he should score the chance he missed. But in his defence, slight defence, there is a goalkeeper and a defender in front of him on the line. He's juggling a few things and maybe gets a bit too clever with it. But, I cut him some slack. He should score, of course. But
no, he should. He's tried to give the goalkeeper the eyes, hasn't he? And he's just overcooked it a little bit. But in terms of the signing, and a lot of Chelsea fans not particularly happy with him, and Arteta's obviously identified that not to come in and play number 9, that's for certain. He would have hoped they'd got one certainly, but he could see a player who could contribute in terms of the makeup of this Arsenal team, that they're all 6'2", 6'3", strong, athletic, those type of things. And I think for what they've bought, I thought they've bought someone really well. What doesn't get, and listen, if you're a centre forward, you're not ultimately going to be judged on what I'm going to say here, but he does brilliant in terms of how much he comes back, thickens up the midfield, robs the opponent, how good he is at defensive set pieces in terms of what he clears. All that contributes to maybe his teammates knowing just how important he is to the team. But listen, Arsenal have got this ongoing problem at centre forward, and until they solve it, and it might be a case where they might well get Isak in or someone, an elite level centre forward, but he won't play every game. Like Havertz may well play that role, but the fact that they don't have that player in their squad, in their armoury, is a massive talking point, and always will be. Yeah.
It's his misfortune then he becomes kind of a laughing stock. He's just the lightning rod for so much of the analysis then, which can be tough. Lewis Skelly.
Wow.
Jeez.
I know. Listen, so Declan Rice come out a couple of weeks ago and said, I don't know if you caught this quote, Joe, but I thought he just summed him up properly. He went, Lewis Skelly looks like he's been made in a lab. And he absolutely does. And you probably look at him and think, okay, so you've been at Arsenal your whole life and Arteta's been there 5 years. And they've moulded this young player with immense talent into the left back that they absolutely wanted to have. Now, this is a guy who in big games now is keeping, I think it's 4 or 5 international left backs on the bench. That's how good he's been. And what is so remarkable, Joe, and I'm not sure if everyone's noticed this, but when he goes into midfield, that he puts his left arm out and it's like a cage. You just can't get to the ball. He's so good at taking that contact. There's a couple of times he did it against Haaland, who's an absolute beast. And he can hold the position and keep the ball on the safe side. He's such a talented player. He really is. Him and Nwaneri they're at a completely different level to the young players who have come through Arsenal in recent years. Think about Nketiah, Reece Nelson, Emil Smith-Rowe, Joe Willock, Maitland-Niles, them type of guys. Fantastic players to come through the ranks at Arsenal and threaten a Premier League team. But they were always players who just came in and went back out again. These two are now players who, even at this young age, will be threatening the starting 11 on big games. That's how good they have been. And Saka went out of the team and was a massive, panic about Arsenal, but they felt that they had one Yeri there as well to come in who would excel, not maybe getting the same numbers, but still offer that same type of threat. But when he got injured, that's when it all seemed to fall apart for Arsenal because they didn't have that link now. But two fabulous players, really are.
Yeah, it does speak well of the club in many ways. They're doing things very well behind it.
Yeah, but Arsenal, all over the years, you think back to when I was a kid watching Arsenal, they've always had those young players coming through, Rocastle, Michael Thomas, Paul Merson, Tony Adams, them type of guys. And at a later time, Ashley Cole. And, he may well have a left back there who could like maybe get as much out of the game as Ashley Cole did, who is arguably the best left back we've ever seen in the Premier League. But they are remarkable. And I loved as well the character. He's got a bit about in that, Lewis Skelly, even with that celebration, which for a young player, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's all right. Take people on. I love to have that kind of, that devilness about you in your character. But at the same time, I still want Arsenal pipe down a little bit. Arsenal, you haven't won anything. This felt a little bit like when you were like taking selfies in the change room when they beat Leicester to go and then to go ahead of them in the title race, but then Leicester beat them by 10 points to win the league. So it's like, listen, do all that type of stuff when you're winning things. Until you do, just stay humble.
Yeah, we've forgiven an 18-year-old for it, but that wider Arsenal point, I think, stands for a lot of people. Even Erling Haaland's dad tweeted as much. This is the team that win everything, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
And I did think as well, listen, Haaland's just signed a 9-year deal. Let's, don't create a situation for yourself over the next decade that you may come to regret. It's funny on the Ashley Cole comparison. I haven't seen enough of Lewis Skelly really to delve into it too deeply. But even there's a certain body shape when he's carrying the ball and getting started.
It's amazing.
And he dribbles with the outside of his left foot to get things going. He starts, you might come around a corner and start dribbling with that little outside of the left foot touch. Very Ashley Cole-esque.
Yeah, and you think about Ashley Cole as a kind of a throwback to the left backs up and down the left-hand side, not really going into midfield as the modern-day fullback does now. But even there was a period in that game where it looked like he was going to pass it back to the goalkeeper and City were closing him down, and suddenly he recognised the space and he just drove in there, and you think, wow. That was
the Cole touch, that outside of the foot shot turn, beautiful.
And they're those type of movements, Joe. At a young age, you think, oh no, this is a player. This is a proper player, and he absolutely is.
He's strong as well for 18, isn't he? Good, big glutes on him.
Yeah. Proper like that low centre of gravity, and he can hold that. He can protect the ball safe side. You're not going to knock him over. And normally, when you're playing up against 18-year-olds when you're in the Premier League, you feel you can. The one thing you can do is bully him. Yeah. I don't think you can bully this young man.
It's funny. Arteta was asked afterwards about playing the two teenagers.
Yeah,
and the questioner, the interviewer, said, "But I presume they're just so good that you have to put them in." And maybe it's a player's mindset in Arteta, but he was like, yeah, look, there's a lot of players with great technique. What these two have is a mentality and a game intelligence because, I've been there, and I guess you would as well have been, Gary. It's like, can I turn around to the other outfield players in their mid-20s or 30s and say, you can trust these kids beside you, they get it? And he was saying they do get it.
That's the massive one there, Joe. Trust, because I think when you're more of a senior player and a young player comes in, you kind of think you have to play your game and maybe a quarter or half of theirs as well in terms of like cajoling and protecting them, but not in this team at all. They don't need to do it with him. They know they can give him the ball in tight areas. When for example, when he goes from left back into midfield and he goes alongside Partey, there's your pivot there in midfield. And I'd half trust giving him the ball more than Partey on the half turn. I absolutely would, because it looks like he's done it his whole life. It's effortless for him to do it. So that trust is the main thing. And I think when that comes, the kind of birth certificate goes out the window then. They don't really look at his age anymore. They just feel like he belongs here and let's go.
So I guess that keeps the title race kind of on life support, but still alive, a touch. You mentioned Liverpool against Bournemouth was almost the more impressive hurdle.
It was.
So for Liverpool, their January is 9 games. They lost twice, drew once, albeit they have Spurs on Thursday in the Carabao Cup. That's the defeat, obviously. 1-0 down from the first leg. You'd sort of back them to get that done at Anfield. Then they have Plymouth in the FA Cup at the weekend. Next Wednesday, Everton rescheduled, is now a much more difficult task than it was pre David Moyes' last Merseyside derby at Goodison. And then, to be fair, end of February's no picnic. Champions League is coming into view. They have Aston Villa and then Man City. Let's see, that game might take on its own kind of dynamic, albeit it's not as scary as it once was. But you kind of looked at the weekend and thought, that's very significant.
Yeah, because of Joe, I've had the pleasure of watching Bournemouth. I actually watched so much of Liverpool, both in the Champions League and the Premier League, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And what you get from watching them as closely as we have done is that you're seeing about Arne Slot's quality of his in-game management, then that so often the opposition look and they appear to be in the game against Liverpool, and he tweaks something. It could be early in the first half, it could be in the second half, and he solves the problem. It's remarkable how good he is at it.
What kind of stuff, Gary, jumps?
Oh, you saw it the first game of the season. You would have seen it, and it was quite headline in terms of the fact that he took Quansah off at half time, and that was just because the centre halves weren't splitting enough. So he changes that. The information goes on to the next centre half. Go on, spread the play. Ipswich couldn't get close to him. But I've seen it so often. The most high-profile games certainly would be Arsenal, where Arsenal was so dominant against Liverpool in that they were bullying them in midfield. So he adjusted it. He pulled Jones back in that second half, and Liverpool showed great character to come from behind twice against a team like Arsenal. And their results, that even though they're before Christmas, they're huge. We always think it's the big ones now, but they're the defining ones. But I see it all the time, even against Bournemouth. Bournemouth was so good in terms of passing out from the back. Liverpool couldn't really stop it. So Bosley was getting a bit detached as that second striker. So he drops him in. And then suddenly Liverpool wrestled the game back again. And I've seen it time and time again. He's so good at affecting the game slot. And we kind of put, I don't know if we're a bit judgy about Dutch coaches coming into the Premier League because they haven't been overly successful apart from Hiddink and maybe Martin Jol as well. And you think they've got a bit of, I don't know it all about them, that they feel that they can tell the Premier League how it's going to go, and it doesn't work like that. The Premier League tells you how it's going to go because it's so good. And he's just sat back and understood it so well. I've been so impressed with him. To an extent as well, Joe, is that even resting 9 of those first team players in that last Champions League game gives those players an opportunity to really keep their minutes and their workload under control. He takes 3 of his main players off after 60 minutes against Ipswich, so they get a break as well. And it's incredible because you're always going to get injuries, but Liverpool had so many last year. I think it was only Tottenham had more than them. So Slot comes into Liverpool. He brings this guy called Ruben Peters with him from Feyenoord, and they had a 90% availability of players throughout that season. Now, I would immediately, when I saw that, I said, yeah, but this is the Premier League. You're not going to be used to not having a winter break. You're not going to understand just how intense the football over here is over the winter period. It's just game after game after game. But he's given everyone their little break in between. And the reality is now is that Liverpool just looks so fresh as we are going into the business end. Players are coming back, the likes of Jota as well. So I do look at them. My only thing that I do think about, Joe, is that I still don't think, and it should be, 9 points should feel enough, but it doesn't. I don't know why. It just doesn't. If they got to 10, 12 points, then I'm thinking, yeah, then it feels comfortable. But 9 just doesn't. I don't know why. Bearing in mind that Arsenal have had a shocker with injuries themselves, with all the send-ins off. They've missed key players, and yet Liverpool still haven't put them away. And that would be the concern, because if you think last year in that kind of like farewell tour for Klopp, Liverpool in April still going for the quadruple, so it can quickly fall apart.
It's true. Well, they've 7 games in 21 days now. On that Szoboszlai, they're beating the press, they're a good team, you just drop in. That is one of the things which jumps out about Liverpool, is they don't just have one way of playing. It's been kind of a thing we've talked about this season.
And I love that.
There's even a certain, humility is too strong a word, but like they're not too proud to be, we're league leaders. If we're going to press, we'll press. There's a kind of certain humility in recognising our press isn't quite good enough to stop these. These are a good team. We'll just drop in, which is what kind of a lesser team might say.
I love it. And you're right, humility, you think, and maybe it's just respect. They're just respecting the league and the opposition and whatever that challenge of that day is in front of them. And this is what I absolutely love about Slot as well, Joe, is that he obviously has non-negotiables in terms of, and certainly we saw that. He came out and he nailed the team when he felt they weren't closing down against Girona in that performance. He was happy to put, so many people say, oh, you can't criticise the players, keep them on side. No, if you feel they're not doing it right, tell them. And he did it. I love that. But I just feel that he's not one of those managers, and we're seeing it so often, it drives me mad, that they have their philosophy and they're not going to deviate away from it. Even if they're losing, they're still going to play that way. And you think, the clue should be in the name. You're a manager. Manage the situation. And he absolutely does. And it puts stark contrast on the likes of the problems that Pep is having now that, they can't play through the midfield because they're not athletic enough, and yet he's still doing it. And that's why Arsenal swamped them at the weekend. You think about Ange at Tottenham, who wants to play a certain way, even though he hasn't got the players to play that way, won't adjust. And you just think, this guy gets it. He just absolutely does. And I've been so impressed with him.
Yeah, he wears it very lightly.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely does.
Manchester United 0, Crystal Palace 2 to finish on that. So they've dumped out Rashford. I'll ask you about Rashford in a moment.
Yeah.
And Anthony gone as well. That leaves Amorim with 2 forwards. He has Højlund and Xerxes. And Højlund obviously still has potential. Xerxes, even the groan in the stadium, the way he gave the ball away in the build-up to the first goal and the defending for that was just horrendous, obviously, as well. Like, on Ruben Amorim, it's kind of strikes me, the last couple of weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks, he's been box office in press conferences. We're the worst team in history. You think, I'd sooner play my goalkeeping coach than Rashford. And so we're all kind of going, God, I look, this guy, he's great. But then it strikes me, if he was really bad in the media and we just had the performances on the pitch to look at, it wouldn't be so hot. And I'm talking about things like Casemiro and Eriksen against Newcastle. Now, I appreciate this is a new manager sort of on a fact-finding mission and trying to figure out certain things about his team. If he needs to figure out that Casemiro and Eriksen in a 2 against Newcastle might not... I mean, really? That was a kind of an odd day. And even Mainu up front with Ahmad and Garnacho, like this, to ask a young player still finding his feet in midfield to do that... This is really, really bad now. I mean, Amorim needs to be a little bit careful that this thing doesn't become so toxic that it's kind of difficult to pull back.
You're so right. And so often, like, say, for example, when we did our coaching badges and we've done our management courses as well, a segment that we were taught on these courses was your press conferences and stuff like that. And ultimately, what that kind of like centered around was the perception that you project. And you're right. I'm looking at him and I'm getting sucked in as well, Joe, a little bit, because I think, you sound right. You're kind of nailing players that haven't been, you're kind of like setting the discipline line and they've all got a toe to it. But then ultimately, I'm looking at the performances and thinking, wow. And covered them against FCSB in Europa League last week, and it was a decent enough performance. I thought he was quite good. And Mainu played in that advanced position and thought, he got into the box, could have had a hat-trick, got in there really well, missed a couple of good chances he should put away. And you're thinking, okay. And then you see the quote, what he says afterwards, Amorim said, I'm playing him there because he can't defend in midfield. And I'm thinking, so you're not playing him in that advanced attacking role because you think he can do something special. You're playing him there to get him out of midfield because he can't look after the ball in there, or he can't stay with runners. And then thinking, this don't quite add up. And then I'm thinking, okay, so the standard in Europa League. So United, fair play to them, haven't lost a game, qualified easily for the next stage of it. But then I'm looking at him thinking, but none of those teams you've played are anywhere near as good as the Premier League teams you're facing. And in Crystal Palace, who in all credit to them, they've got a really good away record recently in the Premier League. But I'm thinking, it's just the same old story with United again. And Mainu plays in that advanced position. And you're thinking, this is Manchester United. I still find it hard, even though it's kind of 10 years of this kind of like reduced status of Manchester United, to get used to it. I genuinely find it so difficult to get used to the fact that they just don't have anyone who can score goals. And you said about Højlund, and I would have been one of his biggest supporters, Joe, by the fact that it used to frustrate me so much that Anthony, Rashford, Garnacho, whoever it was in those wide areas, just didn't cross the ball. And I thought, at centre forward, Van Nistelrooy or Andy Cole, or any of those great centre forward, they're not going to score if you don't cross the ball. But the reality is, Joe, is that I'm looking at him now and thinking, I'm not convinced he can play for Manchester United because he just can't look after the ball. You pass the ball up to him and he always seems like he's being tackled by the centre half. There's never any moment where he's able just to step off the centre half, have that bit of space, take it comfortably, make sure that he's set and just release it. It always seems to be wrestling. And that's a bad sign as a centre forward, is if centre backs can swamp you the way that they can him. And Xerxes, well, he's not a forward player for Man United. He clearly isn't. So you're so right. And then I'm looking at other problems. I'm thinking, Bruno Fernandes in midfield, Palace, their number 2 players, Sarr and Kamada, just kept playing behind him, got on the ball all the time. And he can't turn and run. He's a fantastic player, Bruno Fernandes, no doubt about that. And he's often the go-to player for United. But you could just play around him all day. And I'm looking at Manchester United. I'm thinking, I thought it was the best thing to do to come in now, as opposed to coming in at the beginning of next season, because I think he needs to learn about the players. But you're right, Joe. He must know about them now, and yet he's still playing them. It's such a difficult one.
Rashford unveiled by Aston Villa.
Yeah. I don't know. I looked at that scenario and there was so much talk about him saying, he's holding out for that Barcelona move. And I'm thinking, do you genuinely think you're going to get in ahead of that Barcelona free of Lewandowski, Rafinha, Yamal? You're not going to play ahead of them. No chance. And they absolutely press like you wouldn't believe that front three. Yeah. And then you're thinking, okay, so is it his wages that are stopping clubs coming in for it? But I'm not sure it's even that, Joe, because it looks like United wanted to supplement a lot of it. But the reality is that you're looking at a player who, for all people say about talent, he just doesn't run around. That's why I'm looking at Emery and thinking he's had issues, Emery, with players who won't run around at PSG and at Arsenal with the likes of Aubameyang and Ozil. And I'm thinking, okay, so is he telling you, you've obviously made it clear, when you play in this team for Villa, you are going to have to close and run around in a way that we have not seen you do at Manchester United for a long time. And you think they've got Daniel Marlin, Ramsey, Watkins, Bailey, Rodgers. Like, the only saving grace will be the fact that it looks like Ollie Watkins has pulled his groin and might be out for a bit. But then he doesn't want to play centre forward. He's told everyone, Rashford. So I'm fascinated to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, it's an interesting one on Emery's part. He obviously feels like I'm the horse whisperer here. I'm going to get something out of him. But plenty of Manchester United managers, former Manchester United managers, a quick phone call with them might tell him it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, and I've seen players often out of form, of course, and you kind of want to go to a manager who's got a lot of faith in you. But this isn't someone who's missing chances or that. This is just someone who just doesn't run around. I mean, it's incredible.
Amorim has really damaged Rashford publicly. Now, I would totally accept what we see.
Yeah, but we've seen
what we see on the pitch.
Yeah, we're seeing.
But it's such a stain on his character that the way Amorim has. This guy, he literally is. He won't train. That's effectively what he said.
Yeah, and normally and I've played with players who weren't particularly good trainers, but on a match day they were fantastic. And some of them were clever enough to say, no, I want to save my energy for the match. But if you when Emery comes out with this and we kind of listen and thinking, we're privy to something that's happening at the training ground. He's not training hard or whatever. But then we just counter that by saying, we've been watching the games. I've seen defenders just walking past him and he's literally not even jogging. So, and he can talk and his people around him can say, I'm doing extra training and stuff like that. But that doesn't fool anyone.
No. To be fair, the only surprise would have been if they had come out and said, you want to see him in training. He's so good.
Yeah, it would have been, because you'd be thinking, you need to slow down in training a bit and save a bit for the games.
Yeah, so that's going to be so interesting to watch the next one. See if what Rashford turns up. That was great. We are out of time, Gary Breen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Take care, mate.